Chapter 14. Gaston's Grand Idea. Kingsley had been in denial about the curse, insisting it wasn't real. But Gaston knew the true natures of Circe and the Odd Sisters, and he was worried for his friend's health. The prince was becoming more irrational by the day, and Gaston had made the mistake of remarking upon a portrait of the prince, asking when it had been painted, thinking it had been done maybe 5 or more years before. But to his and the prince's horror, it had been painted only a few months before. That was how quickly the prince's looks were diminishing. Gaston tried to play it off, teasing the prince, making light of the situation, but it was alarming how much Kingsley had changed in that time. And it was clear to both of them the curse was real. Kingsley could no longer deny what was happening to him, and what would happen to everyone in the castle if he didn't find a way to break the curse. But accepting his fate only sent him spiraling out of control, leaving Gaston to try to bring his friend out of this deep pit of misery. Without warning, the prince's mental and physical well-being were in peril. He suffered terrorizing fever dreams, causing him to rant about the Odd Sisters and how the curse was real. Gaston was sure this had been brought on by an encounter with the Odd Sisters, but he couldn't be sure what the prince had imagined and what was real. Gaston and Cogsworth were by Kingsley's side around the clock, caring for him until he was well enough again. And after the prince recovered, Gaston came up with a plan to help his friend. Desperate to help Kingsley break the curse, Gaston arranged for a ball, inviting every eligible young woman in the surrounding kingdoms. If Gaston understood the prince's fevered ramblings correctly, to break the curse they needed to find someone to fall in love with the prince before the last petal fell from the rose Circe had given him. If he didn't find someone to fall in love with him, he would fully become a beast. It seemed too easy. There had to be more to it, but the prince refused to say anything further than that. Gaston could see the subtle changes in his friend, the aging around the eyes, the bitterness in his face, the lines he didn't have before the curse. It seemed to Gaston that Circe's curse was causing Kingsley's features to match his increasingly foul nature. So as far as Gaston was concerned, they were up against a ticking clock, and he needed to find someone to fall in love with Kingsley before this wretched curse took complete hold of him and everyone else in the castle. And as a member of the castle staff, Gaston had a foreboding feeling this curse would change him into something terrible as well. With the king and queen still away, it was up to Gaston to help his friend get out of this mess. They had left shortly after the engagement ball and likely knew nothing about what had transpired since. Gaston knew the king and queen had always wanted to join their house with Morningstar Kingdom, and that a marriage between the prince and Princess Tulip Morningstar would bring their great lands together in harmony. Gaston remembered one of the letters Kingsley had sent to Mrs. Potts from his grand tour, recounting his time with the Morningstars. He said the princess was a quiet, shy young woman who giggled easily and was rather agreeable but a bit dull and silly. By all accounts, she was besotted with the prince. But this had been early in his tour, and Gaston wagered the prince had edged his bets that he would find someone more interesting. Who knew that what he would find was a nest of witches? Gaston wondered if perhaps Tulip wouldn't be a better match for him now. He remembered the prince going on about how lovely he thought she was, but he just hadn't been convinced they had enough in common to endure her for a lifetime. Gaston hoped another encounter with her might change his mind, so he went to Mrs. Potts for help. It hasn't been a month since the prince recovered from his illness. Are you sure he's up to it? Mrs. Potts wasn't convinced this was a good plan. Everyone in the household had been desperately worried about the prince, although only a few knew about the curse. And Mrs. Potts, of course, was also worried about Gaston and Mr. Cogsworth, refusing to leave his side during his illness. That was who she was. It wasn't enough that she had a brood of children of her own. She mothered everyone else too, and Gaston was happy for it. It's exactly what he needs, Mrs. Potts. We need to get his mind off this curse, and we need to find him someone to marry. I think Princess Tulip Morningstar will be perfect. Why throw an elaborate ball then? Why not just advise the prince he should court Princess Tulip? Mrs. Potts looked a little harried that day, likely because Mr. Potts was still away taking care of his sick brother. Gaston didn't know how she did it, running the castle and caring for all her children. Have you ever tried telling the prince to do something, Mrs. Potts? No, he has to think she is his choice. Gaston could see she agreed. Everyone in the house seemed confused about the prince's recent behavior, which was more erratic than ever. He was losing his temper and falling into deep, melancholic moods. They were concerned, but no one knew what to do about it. Well, of course I am happy to help, but Gaston, you have to tell me what this is really about. It's not like you to play Cupid. Mrs. Potts knew Gaston too well. She knew there was something he was keeping from her. Mrs. Potts, you would be shocked and revolted if I told you the truth. You would despise me, and that is something I just couldn't bear. He already despised himself. If Mrs. Potts was disappointed in him too, he wouldn't know what to do. Despise you? Well, I think you have to tell me now, she said, motioning for him to sit down. Like for many of their talks over the years, they were in Mrs. Potts' sitting room. She was seated at her desk, and Gaston in a chair nearby, across from the fireplace. The only thing missing was a pot of tea and cookies. All right, dear, out with it, she said, smiling at him. Cersei claimed she somehow knew I secretly blamed Kingsley for my father's death and would one day kill him for it, or he would kill me. I don't know, it's all muddled now. But the point is, she said I had to leave the kingdom. Stuff and nonsense. You boys love each other. There's no way either of you is capable of that. What was she playing at? I don't know. But I knew I didn't want to be driven away from my home and family. Of course you didn't. Who would, by heavens? So what happened? She asked. But she answered her own question before Gaston could. Gaston, you didn't. You made it all up about her being the daughter of a pig farmer? But I don't understand. The prince saw the proof for himself. Her sisters were in on it. They helped me, and it broke Cersei's heart. You should have seen her, Mrs. Potts. I hate to say it, but Kingsley was horrible to her. Gaston still felt guilty, remembering how shamefully his friend treated Cersei that day. Yes, she was trying to get rid of him, but there was lingering pain and doubt. He wondered if Cersei truly believed her vision and was actually trying to protect him and Kingsley as she said. I see. But this isn't your fault, Gaston. The prince chose to break the girl's heart, not you. You were protecting yourself, my boy. I know it's not my place to say, but I do not like what I see in the prince. He's always had a mean streak and a sharp tongue, but it's gotten far worse since he's been back. You might have lied, my boy, but the prince chose to believe your lie. He was the one who decided the daughter of a pig farmer was beneath him, and he has been defaming her to anyone in the kingdom who will listen. It is he I am disappointed with, Gaston, not you. I knew what Cersei and her sisters were like, Mrs. Potts, but I didn't think... I had no idea they would curse him, and it's all my fault. If I hadn't pushed him to break things off with Cersei, he wouldn't be cursed now. It sounds to me like you were tricked, my boy, by those wicked sisters of hers. But you have to stop blaming yourself, Gaston. I saw you blame yourself when your father died, and now you're blaming yourself for this supposed curse. If you ask me, the prince is the author of his own misery, and it's time you stop worrying about his happiness and worried about your own. But it's not just Kingsley. It's all of us. We're all cursed. Cersei says if Kingsley doesn't change his ways, everyone within the castle will be transformed. Don't you see? This is all my fault. And you're sure the curse is real? I am, and I intend to help Kingsley break it. All right, then. Tell me what you want me to do, she said with a determined smile. Mrs. Potts gathered the troops, and together with Gaston and the rest of the staff, they planned a magnificent ball. Before he knew it, Gaston heard Mrs. Potts saying things like, "This is a dream," all through the house as she amended menus, made suggestions for little cakes to be served in the great hall, and told the gardeners which flowers to decorate with in each of the various rooms. Even Cogsworth had an extra bounce in his step. He was too austere to let it be known, but it was clear he was pleased to have a bustling house again to take control over, like a general at war. And that's what this was, a war. They were going to have the prince from him, save the prince from himself and from this curse. The prince, however, needed some persuading. I hate these events, Gaston. I see no need to stuff the house with frilly ladies prancing around like decorated birds. This made Gaston laugh, because it seemed that was exactly the sort of thing the prince liked most these days. But maybe he'd had his fill of balls after the Circe debacle. If we invite every fair maiden in the many kingdoms, I dare say every girl will attend. The prince seemed more than a little trepidatious. Gaston didn't understand why Kingsley found this so daunting, why he was protesting. This was the point entirely. No woman would pass up the opportunity to shine in the prince's eyes. After his long illness and everything that happened with Circe and the Odd Sisters, he deserved a diversion. And if Princess Tulip wasn't to his taste, then surely there would be many more lovely ladies to choose from. Gaston didn't see the problem. But that is what I fear, the prince exclaimed when Gaston told him so. Surely there will be far more ghastly-looking girls than beautiful. How will I stand it? Gaston put his hand on his friend's shoulder and replied, No doubt you will have to wade through some ugly ducklings before you find your princess. But won't it be worth it? What of your friend who had such a ball? Wasn't it a great success after the matter of the glass slipper was sorted? Indeed, but you won't catch me marrying a housemaid like my dear friend, no matter how beautiful she is, not after the disaster with the pig-keeper. Talk like this went on for many days before Kingsley finally agreed. Little did he know, Gaston and Mrs. Potts had already set everything into motion. The ball was going to happen with or without his approval. Luckily for everyone involved, Kingsley had come around. Arranging a ball was the last thing Gaston ever expected or longed to do. But if he could convince Kingsley Princess Tulip was his best chance at breaking the curse, perhaps then Gaston could drag his friend out of the deep pit of depression in which he had been languishing, and then they might go back to living their lives as they always had, as they had always wished. Every young woman in almost every neighboring kingdom was invited to the ball. It was a gala affair, bursting with palpable expectation and excitement. The ballroom was decorated this time with silver bunting along the tops of the marble pillars to match the prince's frock coat, which was, in Gaston's opinion, decidedly fussier than was necessary. But the prince had in recent months become vainer and more ostentatious in his style and manner. The silver frock coat was adorned with diamond buttons and accompanied by a white shirt with a lace-trimmed collar and cuffs, short silver breeches, white stockings, and silver shoes encrusted with diamonds. Gaston had never seen anything like it. Kingsley looked silly to Gaston, sitting on his throne in the ballroom and sparkling like his mother's pavilion. But the women who attended the ball didn't seem to share Gaston's opinion. He couldn't help but laugh as he watched them promenade past his friend, giggling behind their fans. With giant feathers in their hair and enormous ball gowns, they resembled floats in a parade. Every woman there wanted to marry the prince, all except for one. Someone Gaston knew from the village, the inventor's daughter Belle. She was sitting alone on the sidelines reading. She didn't seem to notice anything going on around her. So engrossed in her book, it was as if she were in another world. It was as if she didn't want to be there at all, and Gaston had to wonder if her father had made her accept the invitation. She was completely unimpressed by the castle, the glittering spectacles swirling around her, and the prince. And the prince was hard to miss. Something about watching Belle sit there reading in the midst of a royal ball swirling around her made Gaston want to whisk her off to the library to show her all the delights waiting for her on the shelves. She was the only person he knew who liked books as much, and he and Kingsley, and perhaps that was why Kingsley was drawn to her. The prince demanded to be introduced. Instead, Gaston steered Kingsley in Princess Tulip's direction. The prince needed a wife who wasn't headstrong, someone from a royal family who knew the ways of court, and wouldn't mind that her husband made all the decisions. And most of all, she should not mind that he spent all of his time with Gaston. Belle was none of those things, at least as far as Gaston could tell from the few interactions they'd had, and besides, he knew Kingsley wouldn't be content with an inventor's daughter, no matter how beautiful she was. Nevertheless, Kingsley insisted Gaston introduce them. Gaston wrinkled his nose in distaste, hoping Belle wasn't looking at them and catching on that they were talking about her. But it seemed Belle was used to people talking about her. It's all everyone in the village seemed to do, talk about her and her father. He didn't understand why the people in the village found it strange that she loved to read and that she doted on her father. Gaston found it endearing. "You wouldn't be interested in her, trust me," said Gaston. The prince raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't I? And why is that, my good friend?" Gaston could see Kingsley knew he was up to something. Perhaps he thought he wanted Belle for himself. Gaston didn't have time to want anything for himself, let alone time to court a young woman from the village, even if she seemed perfect in every way. Gaston lowered his voice so those nearby wouldn't hear. "She's the daughter of a cuckoo." "Oh, she's lovely, yes, but her father is the laughingstock of the village. He's harmless enough, but he fancies himself a great inventor. He's always building contraptions that clink, rattle, and explode. She isn't the sort you'd like to get mixed up with, good friend." Gaston glanced around to see if she was looking in their direction. "Perhaps you're right, but nevertheless, I would like to meet her." "I dare say you would find her very tedious with her endless talk of literature, fairy tales, and poetry," he said. Suddenly he worried he had made a mistake mentioning her love of books. Though it seemed Kingsley's love for such things was a thing of the past, he was concerned he had only succeeded in sparking an interest. He wondered if he was trying to protect Belle by flinging Tulip in his friend's path, and would he now have to protect Tulip as well as Kingsley and everyone else? "You seem to know a lot about her, Gaston." "I fear I do. In the few moments I talked to her just now, she prattled on of nothing else but books. No, dear friend, we need to find you a proper lady, a princess, someone like Princess Morningstar over there. Now she's a delight. No talk of books from her. I bet she's never read a book or had a thought of her own." Gaston could see Kingsley thought that was a very good quality. "Yes, I could do the thinking for both of us. Bring over the Princess Morningstar. I'd very much like to meet her again." Princess Tulip Morningstar had long golden locks, with a milk and honey complexion and light sky blue eyes. She looked like a doll draped in diamonds and pink silks. She was a perfect match for Kingsley, at least a perfect match for this new, strange version of Kingsley who Gaston was still trying to get used to. Gaston had felt so guilty about the prince being cursed, he hadn't had time to process everything that had happened since his return. He realized he hadn't been calling Kingsley out when he acted horribly. He wasn't reminding his friend not to turn into a beastly tyrant prince like he promised he would when they were younger, and he wasn't sure what Kingsley would do if he did. He even let Kingsley think he was the best at everything and acted as if that had always been so, just because it made his friend happy. That was indeed a different Kingsley. It was easier for Gaston to go along with his friend, and after a while it bothered him less, because Gaston's nature was also changing, sometimes without him even realizing it. There were moments when Gaston would step back and really look at himself and wonder who he was. It wasn't like Gaston to run someone down for having never read a book or to assume they never had thoughts of their own. And even if that were so, would it be her fault? As far as he could tell, aristocracy only made it their business to educate their male heirs. And who was he to talk anyway? The greatest regret of his life was that he had never learned to read, and he feared now it was too late. It became clear to Gaston and everyone at the ball that Kingsley had decided he was going to marry Princess Tulip, and it almost brought the evening to a sulky end, with all the other ladies so sorely disappointed, save for Belle, who barely seemed to notice. Gaston did his best to look pleased with himself, to be happy his friend had made not only a love match, but had chosen the very lady Gaston had pushed him toward. But part of him couldn't help wondering if he was pushing Princess Tulip toward a ruinous fate. He felt as if he were throwing her into a den of wolves to fend for herself, and that his complicity in bringing them together only further besmirched his darkening heart.